Developing right now on Morning News Now, millions in Florida bracing for Milton's wrath. The superstorm weakening just slightly over the course of the morning. Now a Category 4 hurricane. It's expected to slam the state's Gulf Coast just hours from now. On land, the final push to prepare for what's expected to be a disastrous direct hit. Long lines of cars racing to find a safe place to stay, facing a roadblock with hundreds of gas stations running on empty. President Biden calling off a planned trip overseas, focusing on the government's response to what could be a historic weather event.
We're driving our preparedness to Hurricane Milton, which could be one of the worst storms in 100 years in Florida. If you're under evacuation orders, you should evacuate now. It's a matter of life and death, and that's not hyperbole. It's a matter of life and death.
Throughout the hour, we'll be tracking Milton's latest moves and bringing you conversations with both local and federal officials as Florida once again prepares for the worst. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Christine Romans in for Savannah this morning.
We're going to start this hour in Tampa, where millions of people are bracing for Hurricane Milton, which is less than 24 hours away from making landfall. The National Hurricane Center says it's officially one of the top 10 worst storms on record.
Officials across Florida's Gulf Coast are pleading with people to get out now before it's too late. NBC News Now top anchor Tom Yamas is on the ground in Tampa, where the mayor is saying, quote, if you stay in an evacuation zone, you're going to die.
So it started to rain here in Tampa, and the conditions are just going to get worse as Hurricane Milton gets closer to the area. We're outside Tampa General, the largest trauma center in this area. They're not evacuating the hospital because of this, the aqua fence. They have faith in this. It held up during Hurricane Helene. Let me show you how close Tampa Bay is, though. It's right there, so the water is just steps away. The physics of how this works is really not that complicated. The water comes in, and essentially the weight of that water anchors this down, holding up the walls. It keeps the water from getting inside the hospital. But even this has its limits, right? It can withstand 15 feet of storm surge and about 135-mile-per-hour winds, and that's exactly what Hurricane Milton, around exactly what Hurricane Milton is forecast to be hitting the area with.
Quickly secure your home or business and safely evacuate the area.
On Florida's west coast, a final push to prepare for Milton's arrival, with the powerful Category 5 storm closing in on major population centers.
What is your message to people who didn't evacuate but maybe should have?
They're on their own.
Many appear to be listening.
You think this is Tampa Bay's time? You think this is the one that's going to hit Tampa?
I'd like to say no, but it could be.
With long lines of traffic heading out of town and many gas stations running out of fuel, entire neighborhoods now appear largely deserted.
You could get another house and material things. You can't get another life.
But the streets in Gulfside beach towns and up and down Florida's west coast are filled with massive piles of debris left behind by Hurricane Helene. Debris that can turn destructive because of Milton's powerful winds and storm surge. County workers who have been working around the clock to clear it now say they've run out of time and manpower to do much more.
So people should assume that the debris piles they see out there, they're probably going to be there for Hurricane Milton.
Yes.
That's gotta trouble you.
It definitely does.
Milton's stunning scale apparent in this view from space. Its powerful winds shaking up a team of hurricane hunters flying through the storm. President Biden canceling a planned overseas trip in order to focus on the storm.
This could be the worst storm to hit Florida in over a century.
Even inland cities like Orlando expected to be impacted. Disney and Universal both closing their theme parks early today. Tropicana Field, home of the Rays, has been transformed into a massive base camp for first responders. While local shelters are filling up, as folks like Tampa resident Jennifer North and her daughter Liliana hunker down to ride out the storm.
A shelter wasn't really something I was considering until I started asking friends, why is a shelter more safe than home?
Okay.
And when I learned why, that helped to make my decision.
And the storm is so powerful, you're not going to take any chances.
Yeah, I'm not going to take any chances.
Okay. You heard that county official from Hillsborough County talking to me about the debris piles. I asked her how much they're able to pick up. She said only about 5%. So you're going to have those landmines all over neighborhoods and homes. She said, listen, there was just not enough time between Helene and Milton, less than 2 weeks. There was way too much debris, and workers and contractors started evacuating. They're going to stop picking up debris sometime this afternoon once those tropical storm force winds start hitting the Tampa area. That's the latest from Tampa. I'm Tom Yamas. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you. Stay safe.
Let's get the latest on what to expect from Hurricane Milton.
Yeah, meteorologist Michelle Grossman has been tracking the storm for us. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. As Tom just mentioned, we're going to see those winds picking up in Tampa as early as this afternoon to tropical force winds around 5 p.m. Now, we saw Milton decrease just a bit, weaken with the latest advisory, but just by 2 miles per hour. So really still a strong Category 4 storm, just on the threshold of a Category 5. 157 miles per hour makes it a Category 5 storm. So very, very strong. We're still looking at all the impacts we're expecting, high impacts of catastrophic storm surge, destructive and damaging winds gusting over 100 miles per hour, causing power outages for days, even weeks, and also looking at that storm surge. That will be one of the biggest stories with this system, because we are looking at storm surge that is that wall of salt water over dry ground up to 15 feet in some spots. Here's the latest. We're looking at the location getting closer to the coast here, 250 miles southwest of Tampa, Florida. Notice those colors kind of invading Florida. That is rainfall. So we're starting to see those outer rain bands touching Florida. Some of it is on the heavier side where you're seeing those brighter colors, but we're really going to see those outer rain bands pick up as we go throughout the later part of this morning into the early afternoon. We picked up speed with the latest advisory as well. Last advisory was moving to the northeast at 12 miles per hour, now moving at 16 miles per hour. So we're going to watch that forward speed as we go throughout the day. But either way, we are looking at that landfall later on tonight into the overnight hours. I'm going to stop this clock just to show you the time frame here. Thursday, 2 a.m., still looking at winds at 130 miles per hour. This is a major storm, so most likely making landfall as a Category 4 storm, a Category 3 storm, a very, very strong storm. And that's why we're concerned about life. We're concerned about property as well. It's going to be heartbreaking for many. Some people are going to return to homes that may not even be there, or that will be, destruction like what we saw with Helene. Then as we go throughout time here, we'll move across the state of Florida, but still a Category 1 storm by Thursday at 2 p.m. And then it's over the open waters of the Atlantic, a tropical storm system still Friday at 2 a.m. And then it's going to weaken into a remnant low. Let's track it across the Gulf here. We are looking at record-breaking temperatures in the Gulf. That's what's giving this the energy, the oomph, the fuel for this storm. And really, we're going to see that as it continues to trek across the Gulf. The only thing that will weaken it a bit is some dry air that it's going to encounter close to the coast, and also some wind shear that kind of shaves off the top. So that's going to weaken in a bit, but still, again, a major hurricane as we head towards the landfall. Bands of heavy rain and wind impacting the peninsula all across the state of Florida. Tropical alerts stretching from the Carolinas all the way down to the Keys, even the Bahamas. Flood alert, 17 million people at risk. We are looking at extensive flash flooding, catastrophic flooding as well, extensive street flooding and road closures that could be closed for days to come, and the storm surge. Big story with the system. This will be record-breaking. This is unsurvivable, especially where you see that purple there, Tampa seeing that storm surge of 9 to 13 feet. So kind of focus on that purple there, but still where you see the red, Fort Myers 8 to 12 feet. And that surge could travel several miles inland. It's not just going to be along the coast. And then there's the flooding, life-threatening and catastrophic flash flooding possible. The ground is so saturated for days of rain. Now we're going to get these heavy rain bands come quickly and furiously, torrential downpours. And by the way, on top of that, we're already seeing tornado warnings. With any sort of landfalling system, we have the threat for tornadoes. So seeing those warnings already, and we're going to see them all throughout this Wednesday. Guys, we could see 18 inches of rain on top of that, winds blowing over 100 miles per hour. That is going to cause power outages that could last weeks. Unreal. So this is something we're going to continue to watch very, very closely, and most likely that landfall overnight tonight.
All right, we know you will, Michelle. Thank you so much.
All right, throughout this week, Mayor Jane Castor has issued stark warnings to people in the Tampa Bay metro area. She told NBC News that the predicted storm surge on the Barrier Islands won't be survivable. A little earlier, she spoke to Hoda Kotb and Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show, telling them this is not a drill. Here's their conversation.
A couple days ago, you were as blunt as I think we've ever seen a public official be, saying if people stay in these evacuation zones and try to ride it out, they will die. Is that still your message this morning?
Well, wherever that storm surge comes, if it's 10 to 15 feet and people are trying to ride this out in single-story structures, there's no place to go. And once the winds get up to hurricane speed, there's nobody to come and get you. And so, you know, the point of being blunt was to get everyone's attention. This isn't a drill. This is the biggest storm that we have certainly seen here in the Tampa Bay area in over a century.
And Mayor, to compound things, high tide in Tampa happens to be at 6:19, which is a terrible time for it. But there are people who either cannot leave, are too old, felt they waited too long. There's no gasoline. There are a lot of people who are kind of trapped in that bucket. What should they do if they are, in fact, in their homes?
People aren't trapped. Our amazing law enforcement officers are going door to door. We have our social engagement personnel, especially for those individuals that only speak Spanish, and, encouraging them to come out. And if it gets down to the point, we can just bring them to a shelter. And as far as the gas is concerned, I'm on Port Tampa Bay's board, and we service 17 counties. And our fuel reserves are full. They were full a day or two ago. And it's not a supply issue, it's that demand. So we're getting that gas out as quickly as we can. Gas stations in my neighborhood were empty night before last. They're full now. So we're providing the fuel necessary. And again, we don't want people, they don't have to go to another state. Just go up to higher ground. It is the water that we have got to run from, and that is what is going to be most impactful. And as was said, 20 miles in one direction or the other will make all the difference. It goes 20 miles south of us, it'll take that water out of our bay. So we don't wish anything on our neighbors, but as Al said, any wobble will make a significant difference for the Gulf Coast.
And finally, you're still recovering from Hurricane Helene, significant flooding there. We've talked a lot about the debris, and we know workers have been, pulling all-nighters to get that debris secured. How concerned are you about that aspect?
Well, clearly very concerned about any debris that's left out, but I got to tell you, our Tampa team is nothing short of amazing. We had some issues with contractors falling through, so we rolled up our sleeves, and we have got 70 to 75% of that household debris off of the street, something that would take 3 months in any other condition, we've gotten done in 2 weeks. So we've done all that we can, or continuing to pick it up until it's impossible to stay out on the streets any longer.
All right, thanks to Savannah and Hoda for bringing us that important conversation.
Let's bring in Jennifer Poirier. She is the city manager for Clearwater, Florida, which is right on the Gulf Coast, about 20 miles west of Tampa. Thank you so much for joining us. Your community expected to start feeling the effects from Hurricane Milton within the next few hours. Just what are you doing right now to prepare for the storm?
We're continuing to encourage people that it is not too late to get out. So if you are in those low-lying areas in the mandatory evacuation zone of A, B, or C, there is still time. You don't have to go far. You just have to go to higher ground. There are shelters available. And so that's what we're still encouraging people to do, is if you have not yet left, please evacuate now.
Milton is supposed to make landfall just as the tide is coming in. So that could put the storm surge at 10 to 15 feet. How worried are you about that surge, and what special precautions are you taking because of it?
We're extremely concerned. We're planning for a worst case scenario, of which is devastating, and which is why we're telling people this is not the one to ride out. If you're in those low-lying areas, you have to get out. So we have police officers and our first responders out there telling people, please go. We will assist you as best as we can to get you out of those low-lying areas, because you have to run from the water. And that's what we're doing to prepare, is just getting everybody out.
Once the storm passes, of course, it depends on where exactly it hits, how big the storm surge is, but what are your top priorities going to be?
Life safety. So checking out to make sure what life safety issues that we have, ensuring that the people that didn't leave or didn't heed those warnings are okay. And obviously the debris is going to be a significant issue for us. And so those would be our top priorities.
You talked about the debris. You reopened the beaches after Hurricane Helene, and there's still a lot of debris and damage. Are you worried that Hurricane Milton, in some of these areas that are still recovering from Helene, will just be that much more devastating?
Absolutely. It's a significant concern. While our teams and our contractors did a good job in trying to get as much out as we possibly can, there's still a lot of debris out there. So it's a significant concern for us.
Do you feel like people are heeding the warning and getting out of the area, or are you worried too many people are staying behind right now?
The beaches look empty. It looks deserted out there, but we know that there are still some people that have not yet heeded that warning. So we're going to continue to push that. But we are excited that a majority of the people that have been told to leave have done so. So that's encouraging.
That is. All right. Jennifer Poirier, thank you so much for your time. We'll continue to check with you over the next coming days.
All right. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued an update to its most aggressive hurricane season forecast on record in August, predicting that 2024 could be the busiest hurricane season in the U.S. that we've ever seen, with warmer water temperatures a key factor in this outlook.
This forecast is certainly holding true as Hurricane Milton barrels toward Florida's Gulf Coast, a mere 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene left a path of destruction across the southeast.
Let's bring in Michael Brennan, the director of the NOAA's National Hurricane Center, for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Warmer sea temperatures, a big factor here. What else is making this year's hurricane season so active?
Well, we've got, sort of large-scale favorable conditions across much of the Atlantic, warm ocean waters. We've seen, obviously for a storm to strengthen like Milton has, the atmospheric conditions have to be extremely favorable in terms of light upper-level winds, lots of moisture. The storm has to sort of be in the right place and have the right structure to take advantage of that warm ocean. And but that's, typical of what we see in October. Is this is sort of the prime, area where we tend to see storms form this type of hurricane season, northwestern Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, with those very warm waters and those very favorable conditions, we've now got a really powerful, potentially catastrophic hurricane heading towards Florida later tonight.
So you are the pro. When you look at the data, when you look at the maps, what are some of your biggest concerns when watching a storm of this magnitude develop?
Yeah, we've got all the hazards in play. We've got the life-threatening storm surge that could be devastating along portions of the west coast of Florida from, the Tampa Bay region southward to Port Charlotte, 10 to 15 feet of inundation expected in that area. That's why people have been asked to evacuate. We've got the potential for, hurricane-force winds across much of the Florida Peninsula. Everywhere you see in red here is under a hurricane warning. The entire I-4 corridor from Tampa to Orlando to Daytona, Melbourne, Palm Bay, Port St. Lucie, up to St. Augustine, Ocala. Those areas are going to have the potential for devastating wind impacts, widespread tree damage, power outages, structural damage as well. And then we've got the potential for life-threatening rainfall flooding, especially in this red and pink area. Again, that same I-4 corridor could see isolated rainfall totals as high as 18 inches playing out from today into Thursday, with the potential for life-threatening flash and urban flooding playing out in those regions.
Oh, it just sounds devastating. And it's affecting millions of people, and these are back-to-back storms, right? Can we expect to see back-to-back storms like this in the future, or is this just unique for this year?
Yeah, sometimes it's just bad luck that we tend to get in a pattern where you tend to have storms form in the same environment. Conditions can be favorable for a certain period of time. You have certain steering patterns set up that will move them in a certain direction. But we have seen back-to-back hurricanes affect areas, unfortunately, in the past within just a few weeks. But, it's important to emphasize that the impacts in, say, west central and central Florida are going to be much worse for Milton than they were for Helene. Helene made landfall up in the Big Bend region, devastating landfall there. We had a lot of storm surge along the west coast of Florida, but for places like Tampa southward, the storm surge has the potential to be much greater here with Milton, and with the impacts from the rainfall and the winds across central Florida are going to be much worse than they were with Helene.
Let's show some pretty nerve-wracking video here. It's of the NOAA hurricane hunters flying into the eye of Hurricane Milton on Monday to collect data. These are not cowboys. This is science. This is essential stuff. What kind of data is collected on missions like this, and how can it inform preparedness now and then preparedness for future hurricanes?
Yeah, the hurricane hunters really collect the most valuable direct measurements we can get, because they can fly right into the storm. They can give us direct measurements of how strong the storm is, how big its wind field is, where it's located. They can also take radar images of the storm. And so our forecasters here at the Hurricane Center are looking at all that data in real time to help us make our analyses and forecast. All that data also goes into the weather forecast models and helps make their forecast 10 to 20% better when we have that aircraft reconnaissance data. So that helps us issue more accurate, more consistent forecasts, warnings, and highlight those areas at risk of that life-threatening storm surge, the winds, the heavy rainfall. So it's really a foundational piece of everything we do here to keep people safe from hurricanes.
All right, Michael Brennan, thank you so much for joining us today. Important information.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.